After careful consideration, we're ready to confirm that the situation is no longer an emergency. Therefore, the federal government will be ending the use of the Emergencies Act.
Plain and simple. It's over for now. 8 days in. Tom, you've been listening to this, I guess, as well. First of all, I guess the big question I want to ask first is, are you surprised it came this soon?
I am surprised that it came this soon. I didn't think he'd go the full 30 days, but since the court cases are still ongoing, you would have thought that he would have waited at least some part of that to be over and the Senate vote to have been clarified. But at the same time, he's taking a lot of pressure off himself and the NDP. Singh did him a solid. They've been in lockstep, because he's a minority government. His majority comes thanks to the NDP. And Singh was already showing his discomfort and saying he might withdraw his support at any time. So I think that overall, Trudeau knows that he's going to always be able to argue that he withdrew the Emergencies Act as soon as possible, invoked it when it was necessary, and revoked it as soon as possible. So I think that it gives him a plausibility that he didn't have. Overall, even though it looks a bit weird, I think he's going to get away with it.
So let me ask you mentioned the Senate. We knew there was a vote coming there. Is there any possibility, do you think, that he was concerned about the Senate deciding not to go ahead and approve this after it went through the House, that might have been one of the reasons for getting it done now?
That might, and that's a really great point. I couldn't agree with you more. I think that's one of the things that he might have been getting signals about, because, of course, he's got people in there that will be talking to him. And if the signals were coming back, look, you've got to give a clear sign that you're asking us to approve this for the time that it was enforced, but the emergency's over. You've got to give us a signal, otherwise this thing might be in trouble. So I do think that it would be very surprising at this point if the Senate didn't approve, because they're simply approving it for the time that it was there, and that's required, because otherwise, of course, all of the accusations under that act, anyway, not under the government code, but all the accusations under that act would fall. So that would really be a super attack on the Democratic side of the House of Commons, because there's only one of the two houses that's elected, and that's, of course, the House of Commons. So the two sides, rather, of our parliament. The other side of our parliament, the Senate's unelected, so it would be a lot of temerity on their part if they were to start undermining the decision of the duly elected House of Commons.
So I've been thinking, surprise, yes, but relief above all, and some hope that maybe this is going to go away now. Do you think that that's false hope on my part? Should we be bracing ourselves for more to come, especially with the investigation happening?
I think the biggest price to pay now, Natasha, is going to be political, because of any which way to try to constitute proof that it was never necessary in the first place. But I think that the evidence couldn't be clearer that it was absolutely necessary in the first place. You had hundreds and hundreds of truckers and their trucks that refused to leave the nation's capital, and they were swearing to stay there until the government resigned and they could replace it. I mean, what could be clearer? This is an attack on the rule of law, saying that they were above the law and that they were going to replace voters in terms of determining who the government was. I think it's a slam dunk for Trudeau on that side of it. Overall, even though he does have a bit of egg on his face by withdrawing it so soon, I think that he's going to still be able to say, I told you it was only going to be there as long as absolutely necessary. That was his key line today. The emergency is over.
Now, it's worth pointing out that while Ottawa is, for the most part, back to normal, there are still protesters camped out at a couple of spots, from what I understand. The question came up. Take a listen to Glenn McGregor asking this question of the Prime Minister.
Glenn McGregor, CTV News. Prime Minister, within an hour's drive of where we are right now, there are at least two encampments of protesters. They are vowing to hold the line. They say they aren't going to back down, and there is a real concern of people in this community they're going to come back. Are you willing to invoke the act again if police can't properly respond to that eventuality, or in other places like in Winnipeg today where we see another protest headed downtown?
That Canada has the tools in normal times, not under an Emergencies Act, to deal with the potential threat returning. And we got a high level of confidence that the existing tools that police forces have across the country will be sufficient to deal with further disruptions.
Now, I should tell you that's the edited version of that answer, Tom, because he spent the first minute and change, the Prime Minister did, recapping everything that had happened up until now. But that's the answer to what do you do about those encampments outside of Ottawa. What do you think?
It was hard to understand, but I think that the core thing that I take away from that is he's saying the police now, sufficiently alerted, would never get caught with their pants down as it happened last time. Mm-hmm. I think that the CSIS in particular, that's supposed to look at threats to Canada, you would have thought that pretty high on that list would be the seat of the Canadian government, fell asleep at the wheel of an 18-wheeler. They didn't understand the nature of the threat. They didn't alert. The orders didn't get barked down the chain. And all of a sudden, given the fact that Ottawa was stuck with a police chief who was absolutely overwhelmed by events, and that's the kindest way I can put it, because I saw one of his press conferences, and it was incomprehensible what he was saying. So we had a Premier of Ontario who treats Toronto as the only place that he's Premier of, or maybe a little bit Windsor, wasn't touching Ottawa, figured he'd leave that in Trudeau's lap, finally had to act on the Windsor Bridge, and therefore was forced to do something about Ottawa. But it's just been a symphony of mistakes, of political blunders from the beginning. Overall, I think that Trudeau's going to pay a heavy price for one thing, his disappearing act during the 3 weeks. And sure, we're going to be told, he had COVID for a while and all that. You can still talk through a Zoom meeting. You can do a Teams meeting. You can talk to reporters. You can reassure Canadians. You can get your lines out there. But the fact that he wasn't talking to people, and when he did show up, he would do things like attack a member of parliament about swastikas and then refuse to apologize when he learns that both of her grandparents were Holocaust survivors. He was pouring oil on the fire, and he did not do very well in terms of communicating with Canadians, that's for sure.
Okay, so Tom, I can't believe I'm about to say this, but I actually like something that Simon Jolin Barrette has done. So Quebec will not be applying Bill 101 at the CEGEP level. Your take on this?
This is a big fight within the CAQ caucus, we are told. And the information I got out of Quebec City is that the coalition word actually is not completely false, because what Legault has done is he brought together the old ADQ, which had been a spinoff from the Liberals, but the more hard nationalist side under Mario Dumont, and he brought in a lot of former separatists. And he's got even a few Liberals and others in there. But mostly he's got so many Péquistes that he's got to try to keep them happy. A lot of his staff are Péquistes, and they've simply bought into the line that, Bill 101 should apply to CEGEPs. And Legault came up with this mysterious 17.5% number, which you can be sure was some sort of compromise between, the two camps, those who were arguing for 15% and those who were saying 20%, and they just came up with this odd number. But they're sticking to their guns, because Legault is the type who knows that once you start bleeding on one of these files, it never ends well. So he's been telling, Simon Jolin Barrette that he's got no choice. He's got to hold the line on this. And Jolin Barrette, you can be sure, would have been much more in tune with the ones that wanted to ban kids who had not attended English elementary and high school from attending English CEGEP. So I think that Legault deserves credit, because he's the one who's been forcing Jolin Barrette, who dutifully delivered those lines today. And, full credit to them for at least standing up for once against the hardest of the hardline nationalists.